Okay.
Is the little thingy up? You could see me?
Yep.
Okay. This is my distorted body. Bear with the artist at work here.
Oh, nice big feet. I'm going to show this to the students in the other room. It has a laptop and a projector.
Okay, so you could see me. Can you see the board?
You can see you and the board.
Okay, so what I want to talk about today is what your physical illness says about your psyche. So there's a big movement in what we call mind, body, spirit. So one of the major sort of complaints, if you will, about just the Western philosophy of medicine is a medical model that is rooted in just cure or Band-Aids versus an Eastern or a more holistic model that takes into account your psychology, your emotions, your physical. And so it's more complete. So in studying health psychology, you have to kind of understand when a client comes to you with a physical issue, how it relates to anything psychological. So I'm going to repeat my 4-step process of how the subconscious begins. So you're going to see my infinity symbol over and over and over. And I always write spirit matter, basically explaining this is more of the non-tangible and then this is more of the body. And we are made up of both. So as a result, we get our body. So first and foremost, we have to understand how the subconscious is formed. And I've said this over and over. First, at the moment of conception. The second is pregnancy. The third is the actual birthing process. And all of this will link directly to physical illness. And then 4 is your 0 to 7 narrative or story. So when we are forming our subconscious, there are certain things that are happening. Here we are starting to develop the mind. Here we're starting to develop our emotions and our body. And here obviously our body growth continues. So we have a mind, body, spirit component during these stages, right even up to the birth process, okay? So everything that we're going to feel in the physical body is going to be directly linked to something stored in the subconscious mind. So I'm just going to kind of give a quickie, and throughout the month we're going to talk more about what the illnesses say. And we've talked a little bit about like thyroid, for instance, and time. We've talked about hips and flexibility, ankles and making decisions, but I kind of want to break down the body. So first, let's start with the head. We know that we have our brain. I know you guys love to laugh at my pictures. And we talk about the reptilian brain. We talk about the limbic, and then we talk about the neocortex. The reptilian brain is specifically related to respiratory, digestion, and sexuality or reproduction. So when you have clients that are dealing with these sort of issues, you know that you're dealing with reptilian, with survival, with fight or flight, with instinct. These are things that have to do with just life or death. So when I have clients, and I have quite a bit of clients that have like asthma or breathing issues, I know that we're dealing in a fight or flight, and I have to go back and ask the questions about whether or not, what the birthing process was like in terms of their breathing. Did they have the umbilical cord? The relationship oftentimes with the mother, is it very enmeshed where they're not allowed to to breathe on their own because the mother suffocates them, and then there's a whole series of questions that we'll learn in class. But you know that if you have these sorts of issues, they're usually directly related to reptilian or fight or flight responses. What's interesting is digestion. Right now, so many people are dealing with digestive disorders. We see people with Crohn's disease, with irritable bowel, with celiac, with just like on all these anti-inflammatory protocols. These are related to living in fight or flight, because a fight or flight response is just excessive stress. Whereas in a parasympathetic nervous system where we're in rest and digest, we're less stressed out, and therefore the bowels can have easier movement. The limbic system is directly related to emotions. And your neocortex has to do with more of a logic or rational mind. What's interesting in physical illness and the direction or the connection to the psyche is, what is your client using? What part of their brain are they using? For instance, I try excessively in an emotional way to understand logical and rational things. So you can see that that doesn't go well. That is going to lead me to some illness, some physical responses, because I can't solve logical, rational problems with emotions. And so this is going to be the mismatch that you're going to see a lot of times with clients. But we want to keep in mind the brain and the brain aspects. What I want to do is I want to kind of break down the body just a little to give you an overview of what parts of the body can be affected and what is the psychology behind it. When you have issues with the brain, oftentimes headaches. What are headaches? What is the purpose of a headache? What do you think somebody is trying to achieve by having a headache? Any ideas?
You're talking to me?
Yes.
You just class, go ahead and say something.
Okay, oftentimes when people are trying and their headaches, what they're trying to do is they're trying to solve problems of their heart with their head. They're trying to give a logical response or understand logically what is happening to them, but it does not correlate. The logic, the head cannot find the answer, oftentimes because there's an emotional component. And so oftentimes there's a lot of logic that people are trying to understand, but rather than honor it emotionally or understand that there may not be a logical answer. So oftentimes headaches are associated with that. Issues of the throat. The throat contains one of the master glands, the thyroid. And the throat has to do with control. Because if the thyroid is the master gland in this area and it controls regulation, regulation of temperature, etc., weight, etc., it's going to be just as important in terms of our psychology. People that have throat issues, and we will do the lecture on the chakras and you'll see a lot of alignment with that, are people that are trying to control or have power issues or have lost control. I've taught about the thyroid in the past. If you have hypothyroid or hyperthyroid, what you're dealing with is issue of time. Hypothyroid tends to be people whose world around them is too fast. Perhaps they had to grow up very quickly. Perhaps they're in a fast-paced environment. And so they slow down the internal regulation of their body so that they feel that they have some control over the world that they're living in. Versus hyper. if you have had or been called, or you have a narrative where you've been slow, you're the slow poke, you know, you were never the one that was fastest on the race team or whatnot, you can create hyperthyroidism in the body to feel that you are moving at the pace of everybody else. But these illnesses are directly linked to time, power, and control. The breasts. The breasts are the only organ that are related to nurturing and the other. So other than perhaps your spouse and your children, you don't need your breasts. They are the first place of food, of nutrition for the other. So with the phenomenon of breast cancer, a lot of people, Angelina Jolie, a lot of people that might have the BRCA gene, a lot of people that just, you know, realize that they have a strong history of breast cancer, they say, chop them off. I don't need them. And part of that is a psychological message that I don't want to continue nurturing the world. I don't want to be the nurturer. I want to put myself first. And of course, individually with your clients, we'll look and see what the exact motivator is. But there is a big message in the breast and illnesses of the breast that is related to nurturing the other. So I had breast cancer on my left side. It was directly an issue with nurturing my children, or inability to, when I got divorced and only having them half the time. The body tends to be split into left and right. The right side of the body oftentimes is about others and males, where the left side often has to do with mom, children, and self. So when you're looking at your illnesses, if you look at the right versus the left side of the body, I think I put that wrong. Yeah, this should be the left in anatomical position, and this should be the right. You can, you know, sort of, it's like an equation linked to what psychological issue people are dealing with. Intestines, the stomach and your intestines. Your stomach, and one of the things I want you to get in the habit of asking is, what is the function of the organ? So even though we're here studying psychology, in your intake for your client, you might ask, and it would behoove you if you're going to use this sort of technique in practice, what physical symptoms do you suffer from? Do you get migraines? Do you get, you know, have you had a lot of broken bones? All of these things mean something. If you've had cancer, and I'll give you some kind of key words and key pointers for a lot of these things. What I want you as a therapist to get in the function of, or the habit of asking is, what is the function of the organ? So I'm just going to ask Adriana, do you have any particular part of your body that tends to have illness or recurring pain?
My knee.
Your knee, specifically your right knee.
Yes.
Okay, right side of the body. So just to break it down, the right tends to be other men. The right also has to do specifically with the knee, that you're being forced to move into something or do something that you feel obligated to do. The left knee is that you want to do something, but you're being held back from doing it. Okay, so certain body parts are specific. The knee in particular has to do with surrender. There is a surrender. You're surrendering into something, perhaps for a male, perhaps for something more ego-based that you're forced to do. Now, in your own words, what is the function of your knee?
The function of my knee is to be able to walk, to bend, to keep me standing.
In the client's own words, you're going to have your own formulation, but in the client's own words, you ask them. So this speaks to movement. Okay, now remember, there's 4 needs. Do you remember the needs?
No.
Well, the student should be answering this. Okay, the third, which is the one we're talking about, is validation needs. Okay, so we have safety, we have protection, validation, and love or connection needs. All illnesses, psychological or physical, are related to a lack of or trying to achieve a need. Let me just take you back for a moment. You were conceived, and the egg and the sperm got together and made you. You were born to serve your parents' needs, not the other way around. We were lied to. You are here to serve them. Therefore, your needs have not been met, and now you're looking for others to meet your needs. And this is why we're all a little screwy. So, oftentimes, illness is the only way that a person knows how to get their needs met. Illness has a function, one of many, but that is one of the major functions why people get ill, is to have permission to take a break, to rest, to cry, to grieve, to stay in bed, especially in a society like ours where you better be working in order to get paid, in order to be validated, in order to be worth something. So this is a big issue. Oftentimes, there is a reason that the person needs to get sick. So I had a client the other day, and she comes because she wants to get pregnant. And she says that for the past 3-4 sessions that she's come, we've been talking about pregnancy. And I felt very strongly the energy of her having a baby, and we talked about preparing, the body and the room for the child to come. And supposedly they were going to start conceiving or trying in November. So she came because she was very worried about her baby being healthy, valid concern. Because one of her nephews or nieces is autistic. So we were inquiring about the need for this illness. So first, we're using Freud. This is what's repressed. Children come with illnesses that reflect the parents' repressed issues, so that now the parent can actually work with the child and with themselves to start healing those issues. And in this particular client, her sister had these issues that we discovered in the session, and this child came to help her with humility and with, caretaking and with patience and other things that particular child came to help mom. So oftentimes, the child's responsibility, the soul's responsibility, is to help the parent resolve repressed issues that they otherwise could not have done without the extension of themselves in a child. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, but that is one of the reasons for illness. So, same thing when an illness shows up in our life. It's something repressed we have been unable to heal. It's a shadow aspect. And illness might be the only way that we are going to be able to bring it out with permission to solve it. So for instance, my breast cancer, I knew immediately when I got breast cancer, it was linked to my custody, and I was able to finally come out of the embarrassment, the shame, all of that repressed blame and guilt, so I can look at it and heal those issues. So illness is oftentimes the last line of defense that the psyche has for somebody to solve the issue. And if we go back to the evolvement of how we come, first our mind, we worry, we have thoughts, maybe we get depressed, maybe we're on medication. Emotionally we become a wreck, but then in the body. So we're sort of warned, knock, 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 work through it in the mind and emotional body, and then eventually if you're unable to tap into these repressed issues, the body has no other choice but to say, hey, let's get to it so that I have a solution. So I want you to get in the habit of asking the client, if they come with a physical illness, what is the function of that organ for the client? So with Adriana, there has to be something around the importance of walking, bending, and keeping her standing, okay, that we would discover in counseling. Because these are linked to validation, then we know that this is a validation issue. Because it's the right side, which has more to do with the ego, this has to do maybe with the ego, maybe it has to do with the masculine energy, maybe this is the one that she has to keep, moving forward in order to, whether it's provide money, maybe it's to be the go-getter, maybe it's, to honor something from childhood. Unless I'm work like her father, then I would not be of worth. And then that's when you ask the questions, but we're talking about the body. So asking question number one, what is the purpose or function of that organ for the client is going to give you insight to the client. Several years ago, I had a woman and her hands were numb. And I said, what's the function of your hands? And she immediately goes like this and starts stirring a pot. And she goes, cooking for my family. And as we started talking, she told me that her mother had just died the last year and her mother always cooked for the family. I don't cook. I'm not going to be going like this. So you see that the client, obviously the hands grasping, holding, that's going to be something more universal. But if you ask the client, what is the function of the organ, you're going to get an idea of what's in the psyche that they're missing or they think they need to validate, or what is an issue from childhood as you ask more questions. The stomach and the intestines. The stomach creates hydrochloric acid to break down the large protein molecules. When people have stomach issues, they tend to create more acid. Usually it has to do with something they can't stomach, and they need more acid, more of something to break it down. So if you can't tolerate a particular situation in your life, you may create more acid. Several months ago, I had, you have that?
No, I'm gonna go to.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Several months ago, I had like this reflux thing, and it's obviously that I could not tolerate this particular thing that was happening in my life. And so if the body creates more of this stomach acid, it's to break down one of many things. You're obviously with a client going to find out the whole story, but I'm giving you just chunks. The intestines. The purpose of the intestines is to discriminate what goes where. To discriminate that you're going to use water and vitamins in certain part of the intestines, that fats are going someplace, that carbohydrates are going in other. So we're discriminating and we're sort of orienting where things go. So oftentimes with the intestines, we're talking about an issue of discrimination. This is a big one because we deal with people that have a lot of gas. Gas and other GI issues can be, I did not discriminate. I can't believe I dated that person. I can't believe I made that choice. I gave away my life savings. I took the wrong job offer. I chose the wrong father of my kids. I did not discriminate, and therefore I am a piece of shit. Because what's at the end with the rectum? So this is a big one. And gas will also have to do with, I need to create space from a situation, from something that I did, and I want to create some space from that. The legs have to do with movement. We talked a little bit. The feet have to do with being earthy or grounded. The ankles have to do with making choices, because they turn you in the right or wrong direction. So oftentimes, people that have ankle issues. Kidneys, oftentimes, because they're related to water, they have to do with life or death situations. What the person thinks, not necessarily that they're life or death situations, but I made a wrong choice, or I engaged in something that turned out to be toxic. The kidneys also, because of the function of urine, and urine is used to mark territory, oftentimes UTIs are related to issues of territory. The bladder is also related to territory. Because if you think of dogs, they mark their territory. So both men and women have different ways of organizing their territory or marking their territory. The teeth. The teeth have to do with structure and roots. Oftentimes when we have problems with the teeth, it is something with our structure that is debilitating. And we have to look at perhaps if there's an issue with a worth, because we're like chomping, or we're thinking about the worth that we're swallowing, or that we're masticating and then we're taking inwards. There's so much more. I'm just trying to give you kind of an overflow. If you think of something specifically in class, just let me know or shoot me a message, and we can go through it. So when a client comes and tells you that they're having a consistent problem physically, we want to find out how this is linked psychologically, because these two are connected. We have a mind-body-spirit connection. Oftentimes asking what is the function of the organ will give you some idea. You can also ask if someone in the family has, or if there's a story around that particular organ, and see if it's something more ancestral, to see if it's something that's been passed down and down and down. Oftentimes we know with certain illnesses that they're genetic physically, well also emotionally and ancestrally we're dealing with the same thing. So one of the last things I want to mention, and I want to take you back to the story of the girl whose sister came with the autism. That same day, I had another client, and that girl had 3 children, and she too was worried about one of her children who had a speech impediment. And she was crying, and she was like asking me why her child had this problem, and if the child would continue to get worse. And we looked at it from this perspective. It turned out that that particular client when she was born, shortly after she was born, about a year later, her brother was born with leukemia, and he died shortly after. This particular client suffered because not only was she somewhat neglected because her parents were constantly in the hospital with him, and what the psyche understood was that illness was the way to get attention. That illness is oftentimes the only